Hey everyone, Chris of Midlife Crisis Media here. Welcome to another Film Collection 2024 live stream. Today I'm talking all about the standalone Blu-Rays and my physical media collection that begin with the letter T. And this is going to be another long one. Just like last week's where I was talking about everything that begins with the letter S, I do have a lot of movies that begin with the letter T. I got two pretty decent sized stacks here, so prepare yourself. Go and get a blanket, a pillow, maybe some popcorn, nice cup of hot cocoa. Well, it's actually, if it's summer, maybe not that. Maybe a nice cold glass of iced tea. That sounds fantastic. I don't have any right now. I need to go get some. Anyway, but I do have this. And I just spilled it on myself, motherfucker. Every time I do something, every time I drink something, especially in the last week, I've spilled it on myself. Fantastic. Anyway, welcome. Hope everyone's doing well tonight. If you're in the chat, say hi so I know you're here. And let's get into it. So, damn it. I hope this doesn't stain. Shit. I don't think so. Anyway. So, first movie going to talk about tonight is the first in a trilogy. I think they're making a TV show out of this. I only give a crap about the first movie. And that is Taken with Leslie Nielsen. Leslie Nielsen. Leslie Nielsen. Yep! Surely you can't be serious. My daughter's been taken. No, Liam Neeson. So, I saw a different version of this movie before it was released. So at my old job, there was somebody who was in my department who was always buying bootlegs from somebody they knew, and they would watch them and then always offer them to me to watch if I wanted to watch them. And one of them was Taken, and we're talking probably a month before the movie came out, because this already was released overseas before it came over here. So this had been out in, I think, the UK and most of Europe, I want to assume, because it's produced by Luc Besson, who directed La Femme Nikita, Fifth Element, Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. And that was during the period where he was doing nothing but producing and writing movies for other people to make. He wasn't actually actively making any himself. So got a copy of this, and the version that I saw was the European cut. So that basically meant that the PG-13 cut we got over here had one scene changed, and it has to do with Liam Neeson torturing somebody. So in the version that I saw, he's got one of the people who he thinks is involved with the kidnapping of his daughter, and he stabs two metal rods into his thighs, hooks them up to a car battery, and electrocutes the guy. And in the American version, which I still have not seen, I understand that it is completely different. I guess it's a little less violent of a torture scene. So I've always known that version, which is what this one is. This one says that it is the 2-disc extended cut. That's the only thing extended about it, is that torture scene is just a little bit different. But classic movie, Liam Neeson's daughter gets kidnapped, and like it's a human trafficking thing. And he being like an ex-Black Ops type from the government, goes on the offensive to go and find his daughter and get her back by any means necessary. And I think it's a really fantastic movie, and I thought it was a real nice comeback for Liam Neeson. Sadly, the two sequels that were released after this, I do not think were nearly up to snuff. The second movie is essentially this all over again. It just takes place, I do believe that one is in France. And there are so many stupid things that happen in that movie, like Liam Neeson and his ex-wife run their car through the front gate of the embassy without getting shot. There's the people at the gate are just kind of like, what? And then the third movie, I think, is one of the most boring action movies ever made. And it mostly boils down to Liam Neeson stalking his daughter in college. This is the only one that I think is worth a damn. It's the only one that feels like a complete, well-written screenplay that was well-directed, well-acted, didn't need a sequel. And if they did, I had a cool idea where I thought that, what if it was flipped around where, at the end of this movie, he tells his daughter, maybe you should have listened to me when I was trying to teach you all this self-defense stuff, but you didn't want to do any of it. So my idea was, in the second movie, she has said, yes, I do not want this to happen again. Teach me everything you know. And in the second movie, he's the one who gets kidnapped, and the daughter is the one who has to go and rescue him. I thought that would have been a fun twist, but they decided to just do the exact same thing all over again. Anyway, we got 2 Studio Ghibli films in a row. I was trying to get all the Ghibli films at one point, and then I realized I'm never going to watch half of them because they sound kind of dumb or they don't appeal to me. So one of them that I kept was The Tale of the Princess Kaguya. Still have not watched this one, but it's mostly the art style that made me want to keep it. So it looks like those kind of paintings that you see in Japan all over the place, like with the certain brush that they use over there. And I think it looks kind of beautiful. So I said, I'll keep this one. I'll watch it at some point. If I don't like it, I can always sell it off. But the voice cast is Chloe Grace Moretz, James Caan, Mary Steenburgen, Darren Criss, Lucy Liu, and Beau Bridges. So I'll see this eventually. And then the other one is Tales from Earthsea. This is based off of a series of novels. Even got a live-action series on the Sci-Fi Channel that I do believe only lasted 1 season because I guess it was super expensive to make, and it went way over budget from what Sci-Fi Channel could afford. So they canceled it after 1 season. And I guess this does everything that the TV show could not because of that budget. When you're doing animation, you can pretty much do whatever you want. So it's a sci-fi fantasy type of situation. Have not watched it yet. I will eventually. But I hear this one's kind of okay. The voice cast of this is Timothy Dalton, Cheech Marin, Willem Dafoe, and Mariska Hargitay. Not often you see her in something that isn't called Law & Order SVU. So I'm glad that she branched out a little bit and did some voice work. Now we have another twofer here. There were supposed to be way more movies in this franchise, and there was a bunch of movies that were made that were taken out of the franchise and made their own thing. There was a couple of movies that had no relation and were turned into parts of this direct-to-video, so it's kind of strange. But it was based on a TV show that was super popular in the 90s, which I loved. I wish they had it on Blu-ray or something because I'd own the entire series. That is Tales from the Crypt presents Demon Knight. Got a little ahead of myself there. This is the first of the Tales from the Crypt films that went theatrical. The show had ended on HBO. Like I said, I loved it to death. I absolutely watched every single episode of that. Wasn't allowed to watch horror movies, but I could watch Tales from the Crypt on HBO. My parents were dumb. Anyway, so went and saw this opening night with a group of friends, and we absolutely loved it. I think it blew everyone's expectations out of the water. We were kind of expecting this cheesy, cheap horror movie to just cash in on the Tales from the Crypt popularity. And when we saw that it was actually kind of well written, very clever, very witty. The acting is pretty much on point, even from Jada Pinkett, who I'm not a fan of. Everything about it is just, I think the thing that's the best aspect of it is that even though it is a horror movie with a little bit of action, it is really, really fun. It is just a really fun, fast-paced, movie. I could watch this any day of the week. It's just that much fun. And I watched this, I want to say, like a month ago, and it's just as much fun as I remember it being when I saw it in the theater. Great cast, too. It's William Sadler, Billy Zane. Billy Zane is like off the rails crazy in this, and I love him for it. Like Jay said, Jada Pinkett, Brenda Backey, CCH Pounder, who I think is great at anything you throw her in. She will make a nothing part, like in RoboCop 3, into something watchable. She's a fantastic actress. Thomas Hayden Church plays a delightful scumbag in this. Everything about this is great. The special effects are fantastic. The practical effects, like of the demons that are attacking this hotel in the middle of nowhere, it's just great. Absolutely love it. Everything about this worked. Was it Dickinson? Ernest Dickerson directed this, and I had seen a few movies, like he did, was it Bulletproof with Adam Sandler and Damon Wayans. So he was doing a specific type of movie. He did a couple, I think he did one of those, it was like Juice or Boys in the Hood, one of those types of urban movies. So to see him do something just completely outside of the stuff he had been doing before, which I think is great to see people branch out and knock it out of the park, it made me so happy. So because that was such a big hit, we got a sequel. Well, the thing is, I don't know what happened to this one, if it was budget reasons or couldn't get a good script done in time because there might have been like a deadline to get this in the theaters kind of thing. And the fact that Gilbert Adler, who was one of the producers of the show, decided that he was going to direct this, and he kind of failed, is the problem, but not nearly as good as Demon Knight. And that's Tales from the Crypt presents Bordello of Blood. I remember when I saw the first one opening night, sold out theater. Everyone was screaming, laughing, cheering. It was a party. When I saw this in the theater, there was maybe 10 people total in that auditorium or that theater, and no one said a damn thing the entire time. Nobody cheered, hooted, hollered, booed, whatever. I think 2 people actually got up and left. It is pretty awful. So this one it could also be the stars that were a big deal too, because this has, what's his freaking name? Dennis Miller as the lead, Erica Eleniak, Angie Everhart, who was married to some rock star at the time, I think, but she was like a Playboy Playmate or something. Chris Sarandon, Corey Feldman, and of course John Kassir is the voice of the Crypt Keeper. It's about a vampire bordello, a vampire whorehouse. Corey Feldman's character goes there, gets turned into a vampire. Dennis, I can never remember his name. Dennis Miller plays like a private investigator who's hired by this like church to go and find him because his sister works for that church and she wants to see if he's okay. And it's just silly and stupid, and the way we all thought that Demon Knight was going to be this cheapo cash-in, this is the one that we feared Demon Knight would be. Everything about this is just cheap, bottom of the barrel, lowbrow, just dumb, just straight up dumb. It is not entertaining as far as I'm concerned at all. Not even like on a schlock level. It's just kind of bad. And it killed the franchise. It literally killed it dead because there were still more movies planned. I know Death Becomes Her, the one with Meryl Streep, Bruce Willis, and Goldie Hawn, was supposed to originally be the first Tales from the Crypt movie, but they thought that because of the stars that were in it, that it was too good to be Tales from the Crypt. They thought it should just be its own thing. And I honestly think that if that movie did have Tales from the Crypt stamped on the title, that it would have done way better at the box office because it kind of did not perform very well. But then The Frighteners, the Michael J. Fox Ghost Hunter movie, was supposed to be a Tales from the Crypt movie, and then they took the title off of that. But then there was another movie, I do not remember what the title of it was, but we had it at the video store that I worked at. It was like a urban vampire movie that had Tales from the Crypt stamped on it, just to try to make people rent it because I guess it was that bad, but I never bothered watching it. So it's not Death by Temptation. It was something completely different. But we had it was a witch doctor, evil witch doctor movie. That was the Tales from the Crypt thing, and didn't watch it at all. The cover art was awful. The stuff that was on the back of the box looked awful, so I never bothered. But instead, we did get Tales from the Hood. So you want to talk about an urban Tales from the Crypt movie? You got one right here. It's like an anthology movie that deals with a trio of like early 20-somethings who break into a funeral home, meet the owner, the mortician, who tells them stories about all the people that are on display in the funeral home and like how they died. And each one of those stories turns into like a little short film. And they're all pretty good. This is by Rusty Cundiff, who did Fear of a Black Hat, which I think is one of the funniest parodies out there. And has a pretty decent cast. Clarence Williams III plays the lead, and he is chewing up the scenery because it turns out he's the frickin' devil. But David Alan Grier's in this, and he plays totally against type. He's like an abusive father. In one of the stories, one of them is about a bunch of evil white cops. The one with David Alan Grier is about a voodoo doll. Like, what are they called? The ones that you pierce with the needles and it affects somebody. Like this kid who's abused by his dad wants to stop his abuse, so he gets like this voodoo doll, and when he sees his dad actually like in the shadows as a monster, he's really not, but he ends up using the voodoo doll at the end to get back at his dad. And then there's another one about like a gangbanger who gets like reprogrammed Clockwork Orange style, who kind of loses his mind, which is pretty good too. I think it's really fun. I did see this on film, not original theatrical run, but Music Box of Horrors, the 24-hour film festival that happens every Halloween here in Chicago at this one theater. They actually played a version of that on film, and I think it was one of the only surviving film prints of that film still available. The sad thing was it's in full screen because I guess the theaters were expected to crop it in the theaters, and I guess that my theater that I saw it at didn't want to do that, so they left it in full frame so you can kind of see the microphone and everything in the screen, the shot sometimes. So still a fun movie. I think it's great. Next up, we have a movie that I hated when I first saw it. I saw it opening weekend in the theater because I thought it looked interesting and I liked the director, sort of. And then walked out of that theater, and I think everybody I was with, it was my brother and maybe like two of his friends that I wanted to go see it. They wanted to tag along. I took them with, and I think all of us walked out of the theater saying, "What the hell did we just watch?" But when it came out on home video, my boss gave me I was working at the video store at the time, and my boss gave me the screener VHS tape to watch, and I'm like, I already saw it. It sucks. You don't need to give me this to watch. So I told him buy 2 copies of it on VHS because it's not going to rent. And it rented like crazy. And it was another one of those movies where, like The Professional, which I didn't like when I first saw it, I love it now, where I was like, it's a piece of shit, only get 2 copies, and it just would not stop renting. And he was just like, you're a dumbass. We should have bought 10. And that is Tank Girl. This is before comic book movies became a huge thing like they are now. This is when they were few and far between. Mostly you'd be getting Batman movies, like in the 90s. And this one stars Lori Petty, Ice-T, Naomi Watts, and Malcolm McDowell. It's based on this indie comic, which I think is from Australia, and it's very unique. It does not really appeal to American tendencies when it comes to stuff, but it is very quirky, and the character, I guess in the comic was really likable. But I went and saw this movie, and I was like, I don't understand what the hell I'm watching. This was directed by, what's her name? Rachel Talalay, who directed Freddy's Dead, which I hate, but also directed Ghost in the Machine, which I thought was pretty fun. So that was why I was willing to give this a shot. And I was like, this sucks. But then I watched it on a home video again. My dad wanted to rent it because he wanted to see it. So I'm like, yeah, I guess I'll watch it with you. And I was laughing the whole time. I was like, okay, I don't know what the hell I was expecting, but it was not when I saw it in the theater, I was not ready for it. I get it now. It is just like, I'm trying to think of a comparison, like what movie. I don't know. It is kind of like its own thing. Like there isn't a lot like this out there, but it's just really quirky and silly and stupid, but also has a lot of really cool stuff going on, a lot of cool ideas. Although the movie did kind of get cut up in the theater, for the theatrical release, they did cut a lot of story out. So some things and some subplots feel kind of half-baked. But I think it's a lot of fun. And Malcolm McDowell always makes a fun villain. First time I ever saw Naomi Watts, she plays Jet Girl in that, and she is hot as hell because she still had her natural black hair and before she started bleaching it. And she looks amazingly adorable as a brunette. I gotta wet the whistle. Next up, we have Teen Titans: The Judas Contract. I still have not watched this. This is one of the ones that I picked up like right after COVID ended, went to Half Price Books, found a whole stack of these DC Universe animated films. They're all dirt freaking cheap. I want to say I probably got 10 of them for maybe $40 or something like that. So still haven't had a chance to sit down and watch it. Normally, I'm honestly, I think I just keep forgetting that I have a lot of these. So I need to check it out. Just as dangerous as brewing below the surface. I do not know what's going on in it. But it has Blue Beetle in it, so I might have to watch it soon. Next up is a movie I saw in the drive-in as a kid, and I really liked it as a kid. As an adult, not so much, but it still kind of has its quirks, so I felt like I needed to get it. And that's Teen Wolf. Michael J. Fox made this at the exact same time he was working on Family Ties and Back to the Future. He was shooting 3 things at the same time. That's crazy. Michael J. Fox plays this teenager in high school. He's like a crappy basketball player on the home team. Finds out randomly that he is a werewolf and ends up using it to make himself popular in school and makes him excel at basketball because now he's more athletic and all that. And like all the people that used to hate him because he was like a dork now think he's awesome. But he starts to alienate his friends from before he became a werewolf. and also has like a bunch of people who are prejudiced against him for being like quote unquote different. It's not great. It's really cheap looking, and it's really kind of schmaltzy at times. The effects for the werewolf look pretty crappy, if you ask me, especially the first big transformation that Michael J. Fox has in his bathroom, and like the makeup effects are pretty bad. But it's funny at times. Some of the characters are likable. It has a really, I think, shitty soundtrack. But, you know, from my youth, used to watch this all the time on cable. So why the hell not? It was dirt cheap. Got this off of the Scream/Shout Factory. Like they had that clearance sale a couple years back where I bought like $500 worth of stuff, and that was on clearance, so I bought it. Don't watch the sequel with, what's his name? Jason Bateman, Teen Wolf 2, TOO. Where instead of dealing with basketball, it deals with a college kid in boxing who turns into a werewolf, and I think it is terrible. I was talking to Captain Algebra about this in the car on the way back from Mo GameCon this past weekend, and how much I recommended this at that video store that I worked at, and every single time someone would come back after would return it, the next day, they would compliment me on my choice. So that is Terminal Velocity. Charlie Sheen, what's her name? Oh, God. Charlie Sheen. Natasha Kinski. But it also has James Gandolfini from The Sopranos and Christopher McDonald, who is Shooter McGavin in Happy Gilmore, as a bad guy. A Russian hitman with a bad dye job who only calls Charlie Sheen's character boyfriend. So whenever he sees him, he goes, "Hey, boyfriend!" It's one of those skydiving movies that was kind of a thing in the early to mid 90s, like Drop Zone, this, and there was one other one I remember seeing somewhere. Never got a chance to see this in the theater. I got the preview screener from my boss at that video store that I worked at, and I came back and I told him, I was like, that movie is dumb as hell, but it is super fun. I would get at least, 6-7 copies of it because I think it's going to be kind of a big hit, and it was. And whenever people come up to me at the video store that I worked at and say, what's just a good, fun, dumb movie that I can just sit back and watch and not have to think too much about it, I would always say, go and rent Terminal Velocity. And like I said, every time they'd return it, they'd be like, that was a good choice. Because this is just a big, dumb action movie. So Charlie Sheen plays this parachuting instructor, skydiving instructor. This woman comes up to him and says, she's never done it before, and takes her up, and during her first jump, she dies. She falls to her death. But things aren't exactly what they seem. Turns out there's like something that has to do with like I think they refer to him in this movie as the KG used to be going on, and like there's double crosses and all this kind of crazy stuff. And the movie ends with Charlie Sheen driving a Mustang out of the back of an airplane as it's like 35,000 feet up or 30,000 feet in the air. And it's falling back to Earth while he's in the driver's seat. Christopher McDonald is hanging onto the hood, and Natasha Kinski is locked in the trunk. And it is nuts. But it's super fun. Like, it is just a really awesome turn your brain off and just watch it action movie. It's silly and entertaining as all hell. I would really like to get a 4K of that at some point. I do have this on 4K, but it is not the extended cut, which I do actually prefer to the theatrical cut. But it's an absolute stone cold classic, and that's Terminator 2 Judgment Day. This is the Skynet edition, so it has the theatrical cut and the extended cut, which shows a lot of really cool stuff that sets the T-1000 up a little bit more than he was in the theatrical cut. So they kind of show the way he operates in this one a little bit more. So when he kills John Connor's foster parents, they actually show him go into John Connor's room looking for clues as to where he could find him, and he's touching everything. He's like rubbing his hands over the bed, all over the walls, the floor, just looking, and it's how it sees. It doesn't have eyes. It's like living metal, so it has to feel everything. So it's really kind of cool watching him do that. And then at the end, when the T-1000 gets frozen in the liquid nitrogen and then shattered and then reforms, that actually did a lot of damage to the T-1000. You kind of see it in the theatrical cut where every once in a while you'll see like this bar of silver kind of like go up and down the T-1000's body. That's the sign that it's hurt, but they show more of it in the extended cut. So it's walking along looking for John in that steel mill at the end of the steel mill. And it grabs onto a railing, and all of a sudden it stops, and it looks down at its hand, and its hand has merged with the railing. and it's actually taken on the color of the railing that has like the black and yellow stripes. And it's actually going up its arm, and he doesn't understand why he can't let go. And finally he does, and he like rips his fingers like stretch and rip off. And then at the end, when the fake Sarah Connor's calling out to John, and John can't tell which one is the real Sarah Connor when the other one pops up behind her, he looks down and he sees that its feet have merged to the grate on the floor, and that's how he knows which one is the real one and which one isn't. So they do all this really cool stuff in it, but they cut it out for time. And there's actually some more future stuff in it as well. So that's my preferred version of the movie. I don't think I need to talk about this very much. It's a classic. Everybody's seen it. Absolutely love it. So I kept it because this is the only way I can watch the extended cut, because like I said, it is not on my 4K version. And then we've got all the other Terminator movies, excuse me, as well. Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. This movie gets a lot of crap. I understand it. It does kind of repeat itself a little too much. It repeats what happened in part 2 quite a bit. I do think it takes a lot of risks, though. I do like the fact that because Linda Hamilton didn't want to come back to make another one of these movies, that they kind of killed her off screen by saying like she died of, what was it, leukemia or something. So I thought that was kind of interesting that they decided to go that route. The biggest thing is the way this movie ends. I thought it ended in a very ballsy way. No matter what we do to stop it or try to stop it, Judgment Day is like destined to happen. Like it's going to happen no matter what we do. And I thought that ending was great, even though it's really depressing and sad. But yeah, Arnold, what they do to him in this one is what kind of bugs me, because the humor in this is what I know a lot of people don't like the whole talk to the hand thing. And instead of Arnold putting on those sunglasses from part 2, he puts on like these stripper sunglasses that are like a star shape and all that. It's just like stupid, silly attempts at humor that don't really work and feel really out of place is what I think ruins the movie. The T-1000 I think is really cool, but I think the idea of what it actually is kind of lazy. So like, the first movie you have a robot covered in human skin. Cool. Second movie, you got to step up from that. You've got this liquid metal robot. Even better. In this one, it's basically a robot an endoskeleton covered with the liquid metal on the outside. It's like, okay, so we combined the two things from the other movies. Couldn't come up with something new. At least, in the next movie we're going to talk about, they did something interesting with what the robot is, what the evil cyborg thing is. But I do like this one. I do think it's fun. I don't watch it very often, but I do enjoy it. I do wish they cast somebody else as John Connor in this. Don't get me wrong. Nick Stahl, I think, is a pretty good actor. I don't think he actually acts anymore. I thought he was an interesting choice, but like for an action movie like this, he kind of seems a little out of place. But I do love, what's her face? I can never remember her name either. Claire Danes. I used to watch, what was that show she was on? Not Get a Life. It was on MTV. Or whatever. I thought she, like from the first time I saw her on that MTV show, whatever it was called, I cannot remember what it was, that she was really good actress. I don't like Romeo and Juliet, but I think she was great in it. So I thought she was a really interesting choice to play like John Connor's love interest. I think she's great in it. I just wish somebody else was cast as John Connor. Like I wish they brought back Edward Furlong, but I guess that was during his junkie phase, so they didn't want to work with him. Next up is so I don't own a copy of Terminator Salvation because I hate it. I hate it. It goes against everything that they set up in all the other movies. Like they made the future look like there was never any sun. In this one, the whole movie takes place in daylight, and I think it ruins the aesthetic of everything. I hated the ending. I don't like the casting in it at all. I hate the fact that the trailers ruined all of the surprises. They kind of did so in this too. So this was the reboot version of Terminator. That was Terminator Genesis, and I bought this because it's in 3D. So Genesis was supposed to be to Terminator what the Chris Pine, J.J. verse Star Trek movies are to Star Trek, where it's like restarting everything. So this kind of goes back to the beginning, starts off in the past when the Resistance finds the time displacement equipment. Kyle Reese gets sent back in time to go and save Sarah Connor, but something different happens while he's in transport, and things get changed around. So when he arrives in 1984, Sarah is not this little waitress, can't hold a gun kind of thing. She's actually been trained to be a fighter, and she already has a good Terminator which is Arnold Schwarzenegger, on her side. And there's a T-1000 that's after them this time, and it changes. And then all of a sudden it turns out John Connor's a Terminator. And the idea behind the Terminator in this, the evil one, is it is made out of metallic metal shavings. So it could change shape to look like anybody it wants, but it also can turn into other things that it can use to, like it turns into like a battle-hardened Terminator looking thing at one point. And it's really cool. I like it. And he's actually the embodiment of Skynet, which I thought was rad. Do I think it's great? No. I not really sold on who they cast as John Connor and not John Connor, Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor. Sarah Connor in this is Emilia Clarke from Game of Thrones, played Khaleesi, and Jay Courtney plays Reese, who was on Spartacus, the TV show, and I really liked him on that show. They just kind of seem to not have chemistry. I don't think they're bad actors in any way, shape, or form. I just don't think that they had any chemistry at all. Arnold looks like he's having the time of his life playing the Terminator again, though. I will give him that. But in 3D, it's pretty awesome. But the movie itself, it kind of like ends with a cliffhanger because this was supposed to be the jumping off point for a trilogy. There's supposed to be 2 more movies that were going to finish off answer all the questions that this movie sets up. But because it did not make a lot of money, they decided to abandon it and start over again. I kind of wish we did get those movies because at the end of this one, Arnold is now a T-1000, liquid metal Terminator. And like there's this benefactor that's been helping them from like the future and stuff like that. It's just a lot of questions that were left open, didn't get any answers. Kind of sucks. Next up is, I got this from Australia. This is from Umbrella Entertainment, Australian boutique movie release or movie distribution company. Oh, I can't talk. That's Terrifier. So I'm a huge fan of Terrifier. I even have a t-shirt with him on it, with the Art the Clown. So this is the first movie and also has All Hallows Eve on it as a bonus feature, which was an anthology Halloween movie where they first introduced Art the Clown. Art the Clown is the focus of one of these stories. I think there's 3 stories in All Hallows Eve. And one of them is where they introduced Art the Clown. The director, what's his name, Damien Leone, really liked the character enough to bring him back for his own movie. It turned out to be pretty popular. So we got Terrifier 2 a couple years ago, which I went and saw in the theater. And this Halloween, we're getting Terrifier 3, which is supposed to cap off the trilogy. And seeing how absolutely insane Part 2 got, I am really curious as to where Part 3 is going to go. But it takes place during Christmas, so that's going to be fun. So this is what... oh, God, what's that dude's name? The guy who did Oculus and Haunting of Hill House. Damn it. I might have to look him up. Hang on 1 second while I double check something. Why can I remember names tonight? I ended up doing a lot extra at work tonight, and it tired me the hell out. And I'm really tired. I am like beyond tired. Mike Flanagan. So Mike Flanagan went and saw part 2 of this in the theater and said that it was, what was it? An Uber slasher, I think. It's like it's the first Uber slasher ever made. So when it comes to this first movie, it does not really have a plot. It is essentially just following around 2 girls who are terrorized by Art the Clown over the space of one night. And it's just a series of increasingly gory kill scenes. And one of them has to do with somebody being hung upside down by their ankles and then sawed in half from crotch to the top of their head. And you get to watch the entire thing as everything spills out, falls out. You know, it's crazy. It's also kind of disgusting. But I ended up watching it on, what was it, Tubi? It was on Tubi because the second movie was about to come out theatrically, and I really wanted to go and see it, but I wanted to see the first movie first. So watched that on Tubi. I was like, God damn, what are they going to do in the second one? Oh, they did things. It's not a great movie by any means. Like I said, it is kind of disgusting. But if you're a slasher film fan, this is kind of like catnip. It's pretty awesome. No plot, but it's fun for slasher fans. Next up, we have The Thing. This is the prequel. A lot of people think this is supposed to be a remake of John Carpenter's The Thing. It is not. It is a prequel. It sets up everything that happens at the Norwegian research camp that the people in the John Carpenter movie go and find, like after the big battle has already happened. They see the aftermath of what happened here, which I think was a great choice. I mean, I was always curious watching John Carpenter's The Thing, like what happened at that Norwegian camp. You know, those people were chasing down a wolf, with a shotgun and a helicopter. And then when they find their camp, it's burned up. There's like burnt up creatures outside. People have slit their throats, their wrists. You know, it's crazy. They even went like to recreate little details that you see in John Carpenter's version. And they made sure that they happened here so that there's continuity between the two. The only thing was, and like I said, I think it's a good idea. I think it could have been really good. I do think it's entertaining. But the problem is that this entire movie was filmed with practical effects, just like John Carpenter's movie was. Everything was physical. Well, when they were editing the movie together, the producers were like, you know what? Let's just go back and redo everything in CGI, because then we can make everything move a little nicer. We can make it at least flashier. The audience will love it. They'll eat it up. And when the audiences kind of were like, no. So they went back and ruined all the hard work that Studio ADI did with the physical effects and replaced everything with really shitty CGI. And I mean really shitty CGI. The things that could have been creepy as hell to see happen with like a physical effect, it's ruined with the CG because it just looks fake. And then because of that, the ending no longer made any sense because it all relied on physical effects to show you what the alien ship looked like on the inside and what was in there. And so there are scenes where there are just random CGI things happening in the background because it's covering up some kind of an effect that they don't want you to see anymore because they didn't want to have to go back and reshoot anything. It is so dumb. So it could have been great. It could have been amazing. Like I said, the attention to detail makes like watching this and then John Carpenter's movie back to back kind of essential. But the decision to replace everything with CGI really ruins the movie. And that's why I think the movie didn't do well at the theater, because everyone was like, cool, the idea of a prequel sounds rad. Don't go see it because the CGI is terrible and it just ruins it. That's the everything I heard whenever anyone was talking about it was the CGI and it's terrible, don't bother. Next up we have one of those, what was it called? Dark Castle films. And that's 13 Ghosts. So Dark Castle was, what was it? Robert Zemeckis. There's a bunch of people that were involved with Tales from the Crypt. They wanted to take all of the old William Castle horror movies and remake them with modern sensibilities. So there was The House on Haunted Hill. This was a Ghost Ship. I'm trying to think of the other ones. Gothica. This one I don't think has anything to do with the original 13 Ghosts that was made like in the 60s or the 50s or whatever it was. I went and saw this opening night with a bunch of friends, and half of us liked it and half of us didn't like it. Some of us were like, that was just a really cool, gory, horror movie. That was just, it's really super fast paced and all that. A lot of nudity, a lot of gore. But on the other hand, it is super loud and kind of a mess at times, and a little obnoxious because of a certain actor that's in the movie named, which one is it? Matthew Lillard. Matthew Lillard plays kind of like Deanna Troi from Star Trek The Next Generation. He can like feel the emotions of the ghosts that are in the house that this movie takes place in. And all he does is scream. It's mad, it's angry, and just screams at the top of his lungs. I mean, the picture of him on the back of this box is basically the way he is the entire movie. Just him screaming at the top of his lungs. The sound effects are off the chart loud. The music is off the chart loud. I remember when I first got this Blu-ray, I was really excited to watch it because I have not seen it since probably the mid-2000s. I think when I had like a DVD of it or something. So I was excited to watch it, and I had to constantly turn the volume down because the movie is like obnoxiously loud. So it was kind of annoying the hell out of me, but it's fun. I like the idea behind all the different ghosts, the 13 different ghosts that are in this house, that have been trapped in this house. They each have a backstory, and they're actually making a TV show called 13 Ghosts, and each episode of the first season is going to be all about the backstory of each of the 13 ghosts from this movie, which I think is pretty cool. It's just, like I said, don't watch this at night. If you live in an apartment building, you will wake up every single person in the building and probably annoy the hell out of them. But it is fun. It's just like it's a little much. My throat is so dry. Next up is This Is the End. It's a comedy that I saw in the theater like middle of the week. Only person in that screening. That was the only one there. But it's about a bunch of Hollywood actors playing themselves, kind of, like, or different versions of themselves, who end up trapped in their house while the rapture is happening outside. And it's kind of funny, the way they poke fun at Hollywood and Hollywood-like types, but the way that they play around with the personalities of the actors in this by having them play like this weird version of themselves. Like Michael Cera, I hear, is actually kind of a really nice guy. Here he plays a cokehead who is constantly trying to get other people to do drugs with him. He walks up to somebody at this party that's happening at James Franco's house at the beginning, and he has his like fist clenched, and he's just walking around. He walks up to, I don't remember who it is. He goes, "Hey, does this coke smell funny?" And he blows it in their face. And he goes and he slaps Rihanna's ass, and then she freaking hauls off and decks him. What's her name from Harry Potter? Hermione. Emma Watson is in it, and she plays like this real bitchy version of herself. But it's mostly Seth Rogen, James Franco, Jonah Hill, Jay Baruchel, Danny McBride, and Craig Robinson. Michael Cera and Emma Watson are just kind of like in it for a little while. But those are the core people that are trapped at the house together. And there is a surprise guest appearance when Danny McBride decides to like go off on his own and do his own thing and abandon everybody else at the house. And he turns out like within a day to have a bitch, like a leather bitch on his hands and knees, and it's freaking Channing Tatum. And he's like, "Hey guys, how's it going?" He takes his mask off. It's funny. He goes, "His name is Channing Tate. Yum." It's funny, but now with James Franco turning out to be kind of a creeper, things kind of have a different feel to it, and it's kind of icky. Next, we have 13th Floor. This came out, I think, the same summer as Phantom Menace, and because of Phantom Menace being like this juggernaut at the box office, this just kind of went by without anybody noticing. I remember the trailers were playing for months, and I remember seeing them every single time I saw a movie, and I was like, that I'm probably going to go see. I love good, like, screw with your mind sci-fi type of movie. It moved me. And went and saw it opening day, and I was the only one in that screening too because everyone was watching freaking Phantom Menace. That's why. So this is produced by Roland Emmerich, who did Godzilla and Independence Day and Stargate. He didn't direct it though. Some German dude directed it. I don't know what it. I can't even read his name. Joseph Roschman, I think it says. I can't really see it. It's really tiny. But it has to do with kind of living in a false reality, which ends up being kind of interesting when somebody from that false reality comes into reality. It's Craig Bierko, who never really took it off in the U.S. The other big movie that he was in was The Long Kiss Goodnight. He played the villain. But Gretchen Mol, she was in Rounders. I think it's one of the only other things I saw her in. And Vincent D'Onofrio is kind of the biggest name in this, and he kind of plays the bad guy. It's really cool. Visually, it's really interesting. Like I said, false reality blending with reality. It's really kind of cool. I need to watch it again. I have not seen it in like forever. And then we have the Thor films, or 3 of the 4 Thor films. I have the original in 3D, Dark World in 3D, and Ragnarok in 3D. Didn't really have any expectations for Thor when it first came out. It was like one of the first MCU movies, so it was Captain America. No, sorry. It was Iron Man, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, and then Avengers. And I didn't really know much about the character. I never really read any Thor comics growing up. I didn't really know much about like Norse mythology kind of things. So kind of went in blind. And I remember this was coming out the same summer as Green Lantern. And I said, I think Green Lantern looks rad. I think Thor looks terrible. And it ended up being flipped. I ended up thinking Thor was great and Green Lantern was terrible. It was funnier than I thought it was going to be. Kenneth Branagh directed this. And he kind of brings that Shakespearean flavor to it because that's what he was most well known for, is his Shakespearean productions that he was putting on in England, I guess. And the cast is pretty cool, even though Natalie Portman doesn't feel like she has any chemistry with Chris Hemsworth. She's just kind of there because they're like, hey, we can get a name to throw in the movie. Yay. The female that I like the most in this movie, like who I wish was the female lead, was Kat Dennings, because everything that she says is hysterical. But that whole, like, she calls Mjolnir meow meow. So I was really happy that ended up being as good as it was, and I was really looking forward to more movies with the character. So when Thor: The Dark World came out a couple of years later, I was really super excited. Me and my ex went to go and see it with my mother, and we all walked out of the theater going, yeah. It's like, it feels rushed. It has, like, the villain in it has no screen time, so you don't know anything about why they're doing what they're doing. Their plot does not make any sense because it's not developed at all. It's just kind of like, I'm the bad guy. I must do bad things. Let's destroy everything. And the relationship between Thor and Natalie Portman's character, I think, is really lame. Was it Jane? It's just stupid. What they do with Loki in this, I think, is dumb. It was a bad idea. And the thing is, the guy that directed this ended up going on to direct Terminator Genesis a couple of years later. So troubled productions, I guess. So not a big fan of this. This is still what I consider to be one of the worst Marvel movies ever made, right? Like, the bottom three for me are Avengers, Age of Ultron, this, and the first Captain America. No, I'd probably replace the first Captain America with the Eternals, because that was just boring. And then we have Thor Ragnarok. So after Dark World, I was kind of lukewarm to the character from that point on. I was just kind of like, yeah, whatever. I'll go see the new Thor because I see all these Marvel movies in the theater. I'm not expecting to like it. Well, Taika Waititi, who ended up taking the reins of the franchise, he brought new life to the character. He, shaved the character's hair off, actually used, what was it? That Led Zeppelin song? It's not Viking song. Damn it. Shit. Why can I not remember things tonight? Am I that tired? Immigrant Song. Oh, God, I couldn't remember the name of the title. Yeah, they finally used Immigrant Song, which sings about Norse mythology stuff in it, or, they talk about Norse mythology stuff. They made it super colorful. They went all over the place. They took advantage of the fact that Thor is part of, like, the cosmic universe of characters. So they have him traveling all over the place. They bring the Hulk back in this one after Age of Ultron, where the character disappeared for a while. They introduced a whole bunch of new characters, and it's just super fun. Jeff Goldblum in this is pretty awesome too, but it's just really, really fun. And this is the movie that came out right before Infinity War. So this is, like, it ends with what happens at the very beginning of Infinity War, or sets up what happens at the beginning of Infinity War. And it is just super fun. I went and saw this 3 times in the theater. And I want to say that Cate Blanchett plays a fantastic villain as Hela in this, and I absolutely love it. So I ended up getting I think this is like a Canadian Blu-ray, because it did not come out in 3D over here. So you can tell this is Canadian by the rating system over here. So that was kind of rad that I found one. Because I remember I went to Target to buy groceries. I just saw that Thor Ragnarok had been released on 4K, or on Blu-ray, on Blu-ray. Bought it, and then that night I was putzing around on eBay while I was at home and saw that there was a 3D version of this available on eBay. So I bought that one and then returned that the next day. Or returned the one that I bought from Target the next day. Next up is Three Amigos. I think is a classic comedy. I saw this at the Dollar Theater back in the day because my parents were not big Chevy Chase fans. I'm not a big Chevy Chase fan either. But I'm a big Steve Martin and Martin Short fan. So I did want to see this back in the day, but my parents were not willing to see it for full price, because also my dad was huge into Siskel and Ebert's reviews, and if they didn't like a movie, my dad didn't want to see it. So if they said it's poop, we're not going to go check it out until home video. But because my brother and I remember kind of begged him that it's at the Dollar Theater. What's there not to like? I guess he was like, yeah, okay, fine. We went and saw it, and we all ended up liking it. So 3 movie stars from like the 1930s lose their jobs and end up going to a small town in Mexico where everybody that lives there thinks that they're actual heroes because of the characters they played in these movies that they had seen them in. And they end up asking him to help them with this warlord who keeps on like stealing all their food and everything, to stand up to him so they can, continue to live without having to worry about that kind of thing. And they're like, we're not like action heroes, we're not really gunslingers, we're actors. And it's really, really funny fish out of water story. So absolutely had to have that. Found that at Half Price Books for like $3. One of the movies I wanted to get from the Disney Movie Club while it was still active that I, ended up getting like 4 movies for $0.25 each. One of the movies that I picked up was the Three Musketeers from the 90s, and it has a fantastic cast. It's Charlie Sheen, Kiefer Sutherland, Chris O'Donnell, Oliver Platt, Tim Curry, and Rebecca De Mornay. And Oliver Platt was not really a well-known actor at the time, at least to me. Only thing I think I had ever seen him in at this point was Flatliners, and that was it. But we went and saw this, a bunch of friends and I, opening night because there was nothing else playing. I really did not care for the Three Musketeers story at all back then. So it was a thing that was playing, and we went and saw it because at the same, like a year earlier, I want to say, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves came out, was a massive hit. So they fast-tracked this to try to get some of that money. And they even had Bryan Adams and a couple of other singers. I think it was Sting and someone else sing a very similar song to Everything I Do for You from the end of Robin Hood for this. So some of the people that I was with went to see it because of Robin Hood. I went and saw it because I was like, why not? Whatever. It's something to do on a Friday night. And we all ended up loving it. Like, it is super fun and fast-paced. And I guess it's kind of faithful to the source material, the novel that it's based on, but it also kind of goes off on tangents. But the big standout in this is, of course, Tim freaking Curry as the Cardinal. He is, like, perfect as a bad guy. Like, I've seen him play good guys in movies before, and he's great. But when he plays like a bad guy, you can tell he is just eating it up. He loves playing the villain. And he makes this movie 10 times better than it is. Not to say that it's bad, but he improves the whole thing. So here we have one of the Bond movies that I am not a fan of. And that is Thunderball. This is the 4th James Bond movie that was ever made. And piggybacking off of the huge success of Goldfinger, they decided to kind of try to do something a little different with this one. I think it's like the first 20 minutes of the movie, 30 minutes of the movie, you spend with the bad guys and their whole plot of how they're going to steal a nuclear missile. But the thing about this one is it is really slow. There are long stretches where Bond has nothing to do with what's going on, and the characters are kind of unlikable. And even, I'm talking about the villain. I'm talking about like some of the leads in this are pretty bad. And like Domino is kind of like this non-character. They made her a little bit better, I think, in the remake of this, Never Say Never Again, which I think is one of the worst movies ever made. But it's just not one of my favorites. Like the underwater action scenes are really boring. There's like no sound effects kind of thing. It's not a fun movie to watch, if you ask me. A lot of people say it's the best Bond movie ever made. I will stand to disagree, and I will say it's very close to the bottom of my list. Next up, we have Time After Time, which was directed by Nicholas Meyer, who did Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. This is kind of a weird out there idea where H.G. Wells, like the real H.G. Wells, who's played by Malcolm McDowell, built the time machine that he wrote about in one of his books and introduces it to a bunch of his friends at a dinner party. And it turns out one of his friends was Jack the Ripper. So Jack the Ripper, in order to escape the police, steals the time machine, goes forward in time to like 1979 San Francisco to continue his murder spree. And H.G. Wells goes after him to do that because the time machine has like if a key that runs it is not turned in a specific way when you're done, it will bounce back to where it came from. So it comes back, and H.G. Wells follows him into the future and stops another crime spree by Jack the Ripper, and also falls in love and stays in the future happily ever after. It's kind of graphic for a PG movie, kind of like The Wrath of Khan is kind of graphic at times. So there are some murder scenes involving Jack the Ripper that are kind of brutal, especially like one that involves like a severed hand. And even the one at the very beginning where they show Jack the Ripper kill like a hooker in an alley back in England, and they show her like fall on the ground and her like she's been like split from her belly button up to her neck, and it's really gross. But back then, PG rating meant something completely different than it does now. I think it's a fun movie. I don't think it's aged particularly well, but it's still pretty fun. and it's worth it for Malcolm McDowell's kind of fish out of the water situation, which is kind of fun. I'm not a fan of this one at all, but I bought it used at Half Price Books for I think like $8, and it was in 3D, which is why I wanted it, because I was getting all the 3D movies at the time. And even though I've purged a bunch of the 3D movies from my collection that I was never going to watch, I kept this one just because I know it's going to be done well, and I still have not watched it, though. I have not been able to bring myself to watch this in my PSVR. And that's Titanic. So, James Cameron. James Cameron can, I saw Terminator 2 when it was remastered in 4K and in 3D in the theater, and it was fantastic to see a movie that was never designed with 3D in mind to be converted into it, and it works so well. So when they said they were going to release this in 3D, I was like, I'll watch it, but, I still don't like this movie. Never bought it until I found a used copy at Half Price Books, like I said. But this is a giant set. I think the movie is actually on 2 different discs. Yeah, the movie's on... sorry. There's one... No, it is on 2 different discs. The movie has to be split up. It is so long. That's weird. I thought that this was better. Oh, no, sorry. Okay, disc 1, 2D feature film, part 1. Oh, no. Blu-ray 3D feature film, part 1 has a disc 1. Disc 2, Blu-ray 3D feature film, part 2. They did have to split it up. That's... Okay. Because I remember my mom bought this on VHS when it was released, and that was on 2 VHSs because it took up so much space. It's such a long movie. But I just never could get into this one. I thought it was super cheesy. Like, what was James Cameron known for at the time? Terminator, Aliens, The Abyss, Terminator 2, True Lies, like action movies. And then there's like this melodrama bullshit happening on this, and a really unconvincing love story with characters that I did not like. And I remember when the iceberg thing happens, like, oh yeah, the boat was going to sink, right? Kill all these people, please. Did not like it. Saw it opening night theatrically. And I remember all the people around me and my buddy who went and saw it were crying and sniffling and got hankies out. And I'm sitting there looking around. I'm like, y'all suck. What's the runtime? Welcome, Spenny. How's it going? I don't know, because I have movies that are 3 hours on a Blu-ray, and it's one Blu-ray. It's like a multi-level or multi-layered Blu-ray. Because of it being in 3D, it might be the reason why they had to split it up, because it's more information that the disc couldn't handle for a 3-hour film. So that could be the reason. I'm not sure. I think it's just strange that I have a movie that's only 3 hours long split up between 2 Blu-rays. Like I said, it should fit on one disc. That might be because the way he remastered it. I don't know. Strange. Next up, we have Titus, which is a movie version of Titus Andronicus from William Shakespeare. Saw this in the theater opening night. It was only playing at one theater that was way up north, almost in Wisconsin from where I'm at. And me and a friend of mine went and checked it out, and we were not prepared for this. So this is directed by... Oh, man, what's her name? I have to look it up because I cannot read. Is it on there? Julie Taymor. She was a stage director. She was the one responsible for that Spider-Man play that kept on getting delayed because people kept getting injured. It was her play. She was directing it. Was that Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark or whatever it was, where they were doing stuff on the ceilings and the people that were playing Spider-Man kept getting dropped to the floor from the ceiling and stuff. So she brought her stage play sensibilities to a feature film, and it's nuts. It's like what happens when you give someone who's running these stage plays where they have to use crazy costumes and some weird looking sets because it's all cardboard and stuff. You give them millions of dollars to make a movie. Well, she went crazy with everything. All the costumes, hairstyles, the visual effects, the sets, everything is nuts. And I always loved Titus Andronicus, the story, the play that Shakespeare wrote. So seeing it done in this off-the-wall kind of style kind of took me aback at first, but it's visually one of the coolest movies I think I've ever seen. And it has a pretty decent cast, too. It's Anthony Hopkins, Jessica Lange, the guy who played Nightcrawler in X2. Oh, God, I can't remember. Alan Cumming. 85 minutes or whatever. Yeah. I do believe there are Blu-rays that are triple layered sometimes if you need to fit a lot of information on it. but it kind of cuts down the resolution. But like a dual layered Blu-ray should be able to cover Titanic without a problem. But maybe it is the 3D transfer is what took up all the space, all the extra space. Rad ass movie. It's just really long. You want to talk about a long ass movie? This one is like way over 3 hours. But I absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. And it's gross too. Like the story, what ends up happening at the end is gross, but it's awesome. Next up, we have TMNT, which is the CG animated Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie that came out in the mid-2000s. And by that point, I could really give two squirts about these characters anymore. I'm not a kid anymore. I've not watched any of the animated shows, the multiple animated shows, the Next Mutation live action thing that they did. None of that. So this came out a weekend where me and one of my friends had gotten together like on a Friday night after work, and we're like, what do you want to do? Like, let's go see a movie. What's playing? Not much. Well, there's that Turtles movie. Yeah, might as well. That's kind of the conversation we had about it. And we went and saw it, and it ended up being pretty cool. It's got a really interesting animation style, like CG animation style. They made it dark, so it's more like the original comic books by Laird and Eastman. And I like the way where the story ended up going. Like Leonardo kind of went off on his own to learn how to be a better leader. So he kind of left the other three alone for a while, and they become kind of resentful of him. You know, they think he abandoned him. Raphael's kind of gone out and become like this dark Avenger at night, kind of like Batman. And they kind of have it out at one point, which I think is one of the coolest fight scenes I've ever seen recreated in CGI. It's a lot of fun. It has a decent voice cast too. So Chris Evans plays Casey Jones. Sarah Michelle Gellar is April O'Neil. I don't think any like major star plays any of the Turtles. I think it's a bunch of no-namers. I'm trying to think. Chris Evans, Sarah Michelle Gellar. Mako plays Splinter, and he died just after recording all of his dialogue for this. So this is technically his last performance, which is kind of sad. Way better than it had any right to be, I feel. It doesn't get any respect. I do wish it got a sequel of some kind, because it did make decent money, but they ended up going with those Michael Bay, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle like hybrid CGI live action movies, which I do not like. This I saw in the theater when I had a bruised rib. So what do you do when you have a bruised rib and it hurts to breathe? You go and see a comedy, apparently, which is exactly what I did. I was in pain that whole movie. And that's Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. So this is the drag queen movie with Patrick Swayze, Wesley Snipes, and John Leguizamo, where like these three drag queens are on their way to a competition across the country, and their car breaks down in this small little podunk town where there's like, 50 people who live there. And, they kind of befriend some don't like the fact that they're drag queens and all that, but it's a lot of fun. It's really funny. Got a lot of heart, I got to say. But the thing is, like I said, why did I go and see this when I had a bruised rib? Knowing that it was going to be a comedy, and I was trying so hard not to laugh at certain scenes because it felt like I was being stabbed in the chest with a knife. So, bad idea to go see it, but I do love it. I think this and the other big drag queen movie that came out at the same time, which was Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, are two of the funniest comedies I remember seeing in the 90s. So when that came out through Shot Factory, I jumped on it because I had not seen it in forever, and it still holds up. It's still funny. Although Wesley Snipes does not make a convincing woman at all. It is kind of comical how unfemale he looks when he's in drag, which is kind of funny. Next up, we have the reboot of Tomb Raider. I almost called it Terminator. Tomb Raider. This is the one with Alicia Vikander as Lara Croft. I was not a fan of the Angelina Jolie Tomb Raider movies. I thought they had nothing to do with anything with the games. It was just kind of like in name only. And I thought that she was kind of a good choice to play the character, but I just didn't like the way that she played her. I didn't like the way that the movie was told, like the story. It was just a big jumble mess. And the second one I thought was even worse, although the last 10 minutes of that movie is kind of fantastic. But I was really excited to see this because this was based off of the reboot video games as well. The original or remake of Terminator, which ended up having like 3 games total. Was it Tomb Raider, Rise of the Tomb Raider, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which I think are all fantastic games. And Alicia Vikander is a fantastic choice to play Lara Croft. I think she was great in the movie. And this kind of is a retelling of that reboot game. It follows a lot of the same plot lines and follows a lot of the same characters. They do make some changes. It's going to happen. Some things that are in a video game that you have all that time to explain in detail. You only have 2 hours to do it here. So they kind of changed a couple of things just to simplify it. But it basically follows the same idea. Really fun. Could have been a lot better, though. But this is the 3D version. I ended up having to get this from Korea, which is why, this is a Warner Brother and MGM co-venture. I guess that's the people who released it overseas. But yeah, I ended up getting this from Korea, which is why it's so much of a thicker Blu-ray case than normal. And here we have one of those James Bond movies I'm kind of like, I'll be right back. I need to turn my AC unit on because it is getting hot as hell in here right now. I'll be back in a few seconds. That is much better. It was getting kind of hot in here. So, okay, so I left off saying this is one of those Bond movies I'm kind of like, on. And that is Tomorrow Never Dies. This is the second Bond movie with Pierce Brosnan in it. And after GoldenEye, I was like all in on Bond. Like, you have no idea. So, rushed out to see this opening night. And for what it was being advertised as, I think I was kind of lied to. They made you think that certain characters that are on the poster are going to be in the movie the whole time, and they're not. Like Terry Hatcher. So, although I was super thrilled to see Michelle Yeoh get like a big role in an American movie for a change. She was a huge star in China. I had seen a bunch of movies from Hong Kong with her in it. I thought she was not only a fantastic actress, but a fantastic martial artist in movies. So I was super thrilled, which is one of the main reasons I was like super excited about it. But it does feel kind of like this half-baked Bond movie that was kind of rushed to the finish line. It does have a lot of like ideas that are not fleshed out. Like, you can tell there's something going on with the main henchman for the villain. And they never really tell you what it is. But then when I read the novelization, they're like, oh, he had his pain and pleasure receptors switched. So whenever something would happen to him that would normally inflict pain, he would get off on it. So there's a scene in the movie where Bond stabs him in the thigh with like this really weird looking knife, and he kind of smiles when it happens instead of going like, so something's up. But they cut that whole subplot out of the movie, and it kind of doesn't make sense because now the character's just barely in the movie, so they cut him out basically. The villain isn't all that threatening. He's a media mogul who wants to like start a war with his newspaper. So yeah, it's kind of just okay if you ask me. There's cool stuff in it, but like I just feel like it was this script that needed a couple more drafts to flesh everything out. So it's not terrible. It's not Never Say Never Again, but it's definitely not Moonraker or GoldenEye. Here's another movie I'm not a big fan of, but I wanted to keep it because of the 3D. And it's a movie that was not made in 3D. It was post-converted into 3D like decades after the fact. And that's the original Top Gun. And it has kind of a cool lenticular 3D cover. You can kind of see Tom Cruise moving around. So this is one of those movies that was super popular when it was released. And I was aware of how popular it was. Never went and saw it in the theater. Didn't really care. Came to home video. Didn't really care. Was on cable all the time. Didn't really care. I caught bits and pieces of it here and there, and I'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's Top Gun. Whatever. Never had any intention of sitting through it. So, like I said, I've seen bits and pieces. I want to say I had seen maybe half the movie over the years. And then I was looking for all these 3D Blu-rays to add to my collection because I was trying to get all these, as many 3D Blu-rays as I possibly could. Found this at Half Price Books, and it was like $10. So I was like, all right, fine, I'll buy it, even though I know I'm probably not going to like it. And I swear to God, I fell asleep with that PSVR headset on, watching this in 3D. After the first 20 minutes, I was out like a light. Do you know how hard it is to fall asleep with a PlayStation VR helmet on your head? It's hard. But I did it. I passed out dead, and I woke up just as the credits started rolling. I was like, well, I'm never going to finish this movie, so whatever. First time I ever watched it from beginning to end was right before the sequel was released, because the trailers for the sequel looked amazing. And I was like, that looks kind of rad. I am probably going to go and see that. It would probably help if I watched the first movie. So I finally sat down. I watched it on Paramount Plus, and I was like, yeah, I still don't like it, but I still do want to go and see the sequel, and the sequel is amazing. So that's the only reason this is in my collection, because I love the second one now, and this is in 3D, so that's it. I didn't keep it because I liked it. Next up we have, I think this is like a diamond in the rough comedy for people who are looking for something funny to watch. Every time I bring this movie up, not a lot of people know what I'm talking about. And that is Top Secret. This is one of Val Kilmer's, if not his first movie. This is made by the Zucker brothers and what's his name, Abrams? Yeah, Jim Abrams. The people that made Airplane, the original Airplane, and Kentucky Fried Movie. So this is a parody, mostly a parody of James Bond movies and The Great Escape and like other movies of the time. It is super funny. So Val Kilmer plays an Elvis-type rock star who is sent into Germany during World War II to spy on the Germans through his concerts that he's going to be given. And it's ridiculous, the shit that goes on in this movie. The visual gags and I don't know. The thing I like the most about Airplane are like the wordplay jokes. There's a ton of that in here. So there's a scene where Val Kilmer is at this German restaurant, and he's sitting there with his manager, and this girl that he has talked to a couple times that he's interested in sits at the table, and she orders something in German to the waiter, and he goes, "Do you know any German?" And she goes, "Oh, I know a little German. He's sitting right over there." And you see a little person in lederhosen stand up and wave at her, and I'm like, God damn it! It's that kind of stuff that I think is super funny. So the guy Deja Vu, there's a dude in this named Deja Vu, and every time he walks up to somebody, they're like, "Have we met before?" He's like, "I don't think so." I was like, So I absolutely love that one. If you loved Airplane, watch that one. Val Kilmer sings all of his own songs in it. They're stupid ass songs, but he's singing them. I still need to watch this one. I bought this because of was it Retro Cult Home Video? I was on his channel quite a bit a few years ago talking about Full Moon films and Empire films, and one of the movies he kept on saying that I needed to watch from the pre-Empire library, you know, when Charles Band was like producing and directing movies, like really low budget movies that ended up getting him enough money to create Empire films. This one was one that I needed to watch, and it's called Tourist Trap. And I got this off of the Full Moon Features website. So was that Full Moon Direct? Dirt freaking cheap, because he has sales on his website all the time. So even though I have never seen this before, I bought it. It's the uncut version. So this is a slasher movie that was rated PG back in the day. This came out like in, 1980 or something? And it was PG, and there was like full-on slasher stuff going on in it. But I guess this is the uncut version of it that showed in foreign territories. But I've never seen it before, so I still need to watch it. But he was always saying, Retro Cult Home Video was always saying that even for like a PG-rated slasher movie, it is beyond creepy and effective. So I don't know much about it other than the fact that it has to do with a bunch of mannequins and stuff. I'll watch it eventually. Because this is kind of at the bottom of my shelving unit, it's kind of hard for me to see a little bit unless I'm like on the floor looking at it while I'm on my knees or sitting on my butt or something. So I usually forget the movies and the teas to watch. Here's one that I saw in the theater. Every time I was able to talk my parents into taking me and my brother to go and see a movie in the theater that they did not want to see, my dad would always walk out of that theater going like, never again. And this is one of those movies. So we're talking when 3D was popular in theaters back in the early 80s. You had Jaws 3D, Amityville 3D, Friday the 13th 3D, and all that. There was this movie called Coming At Ya that started the whole craze back up again in like 1980. And the people who made that movie, because it was such a big hit, they went and made another 3D movie, and it is terrible. But I saw the trailers for it a couple of times. I saw commercials for it on TV with my Saturday morning cartoons. And me and my brother like ran into their bedroom while my parents were still sleeping and jumped up and down in their bed and like, you need to take us to see this movie today. And my dad was like, that looks like such a piece of shit. And we were just like, we don't care. We want to see it. It looks awesome. It looks like Indiana Jones in 3D. And oh, were we wrong? And that is Treasure of the Four Crowns. So this is a low-rent Indiana Jones ripoff. A couple of bounty or like fortune hunters are hired to go and find this jewel that a cult has stolen, and they plan to use it to take over the world. And it is just beyond stupid. There was nonsensical stuff happening in 3D. Stuff flies around rooms for no reason. There's like laser beams and flamethrowers that come out of nowhere in this. It's stupid. It is so dumb. And then the ending is one of the most random freaking things you'll ever see in your life. And I'm not going to ruin it, but it does not make a lick of sense. Does not have anything to do with the movie you just watched. It is just another random 3D gag they decided to throw at you for no reason at all, other than the fact that they could. But the 3D is actually pretty good. So there was like a VHS release of this that I remember we rented back in the day. And I don't think this ever came out on DVD. But when I saw that Kino Lorber had gotten together with, what is it, the 3D Film Archive, who is still keeping 3D Blu-ray alive. Sure, they don't release very much anymore, but when they do, it's usually something pretty cool. Can we get Star Chaser, The Legend of Orin in 3D, or Space Hunter, or Tales of the Forbidden Zone in 3D? Because I would absolutely love that. I saw that they had teamed up with Kino Lorber to release this in 3D, on a 3D Blu-ray, I jumped on it because I wanted to see this in 3D again so bad. Does it hold up? Yeah, the 3D is still pretty good. I mean, it looks better now than it did back then because they've cleaned up the picture quite a bit. But the movie itself is still a flaming pile of shit. And you can see how cheesy it really is. The lead star of this movie and coming at you, his name is Tony Anthony. So his name is Anthony or Tony. That is the dumbest shit ever. And this poster, which was the theatrical one sheet, has nothing to do with the movie you're about to watch. It is so dumb. But I had to get it because it's nostalgia from my youth. And it's in 3D, and I wanted to get all the 3D things. And speaking of 3D, here's another thing, well, two things that were post-converted into 3D. Found these at the Exchange right down the street from me. Just happened to be glancing through their little 3D Blu-ray section that they have in their movie area and saw these two things sitting there. And I was like, well, if there's some Pixar movies that I think would make fantastic 3D films, it's these two things right here. So I jumped on them while they were still there, and they're complete, and they come with their outer sleeve with a lenticular cover. It is Toy Story and Toy Story 2. I absolutely love these two movies. I'm not a big fan of Pixar stuff anymore. I think they kind of lost the touch that they originally had, or the original... I got the hiccups out of nowhere. I used to think their movies had a lot of heart, and they were really well made, and the stories were always pretty good. They could appeal to kids and adults. I think they kind of lost that after a while when they're just trying to cram out as many movies as they possibly could within the space of a year. Like, we used to get a Pixar movie once every 3 years. Now we're getting like sometimes 2 a year. Just slow your roll, slow down. How about you make sure that script is top notch before you make a movie out of it? Wish. So seeing that these were transferred into 3D or got a conversion in 3D is fantastic. And they do look really good. And for movies that were never designed to be in 3D, they work remarkably well, especially like in the layering effect with the like immersion factor. And especially when you're watching in the 3D, the PSVR helmet, it's really immersive, and I really liked it, and they did a great job with these. I was not a fan of the third or fourth movies, so I will not be buying those, even if they are in 3D or not. I'm pretty sure the third one was. I think I saw it in the theater in 3D, but I don't know if they ever gave it a 3D release. I'm sure they did. Anyway, so we're getting pretty close. Next up is a movie that I used to watch on cable all the time, and I probably going to watch it again tonight, which is why I'm opening it right now, because it's a ridiculous comedy called Transylvania 65000. Yes, that is Jeff Goldblum on the cover, and also Ed Begley Jr. Who else is in this? Joseph Bologna, Carol Kane, Jeffrey Jones, John Biner, one of Gina Davis's first movies, and she is showing a lot of skin in it. Michael Richards, one of the first things I ever saw him in. So it's a comedy about a couple of tabloid reporters who are sent to Transylvania because there's been reports of a Frankenstein's monster running loose. And they come across this mad doctor who has created like a mummy, a wolf man. You know, there's a Frankenstein's monster. There's also a vampire, which Gina Davis plays. But things aren't exactly what they seem, but it is super funny. It is really kind of slapsticky at times. And there's one joke in this movie that gets me every time I see it. So Ed Begley Jr. of the two reporters is like the cowardly one. And he's out in the forest and he sees the Frankenstein's monster in front of him. And he's like standing at like the bed of a lake. And he gets like scared shitless. So he starts to back up and he goes into the lake. And as he's standing there cowering in the lake, you see this hand come up from the water between his legs and grab his crotch and squeeze. And the face that Ed Begley Jr. makes when his dick gets crushed is one of the funniest things ever. Just a thing that he does. I laugh just thinking about it. I'm about to lose my shit. It's really, really funny. It's really stupid, but I think it's funny. And like the message at the end about acceptance, I think, is really nice too. I'm super thirsty tonight. God damn. Next up, we have Trance, which is by Danny Boyle. I saw a sneak preview of this movie, I want to say a week before it was released theatrically. I won tickets to see this screening from Ain't It Cool News. I used to win free tickets to preview screenings in Chicago all the time on Ain't It Cool News. It was really easy to do it, too. Like, the stuff they required you to do was super simple. And I want to say out of every 10 that I would sign up for, I'd win tickets 9 times out of the 10. So it took my ex to go and see this, and I knew absolutely nothing about it. I had not heard of it before it was being released. I never saw one trailer, one TV commercial, nothing. So when the free tickets went up for, you know, the contest on Ain't It Cool News, I was like, I don't care. It's a free movie, and it's Danny Boyle. I'm in, because I love Danny Boyle's films. So won the tickets, went and saw it. No expectations. We're watching it. We're like, what the hell is going on in this movie? It is this twisty-turvy mind fuck of a movie where James McAvoy plays a guy who works at an art auction house that a bunch of people try to rob. He hides this painting that they're after, and then they clock him over the head, and he loses his memory of where he hid it. So he ends up having to go to a hypnotherapist played by Rosario Dawson to try to recall where he hid that painting. Otherwise, he's going to get charged with like grand theft larceny or whatever, grand theft whatever it is. And it's the things that the hypnotherapy unlocks is absolutely crazy. And the directions this movie ends up going, it starts off in one place and it ends in some place completely different. And I absolutely loved it for that. It is like it's multiple red herrings and other things you think are going on. Nope. It goes to a really crazy place, and I love it. I absolutely love it. It's, like I said, a really good mindfuck movie. So I highly recommend that one. It has a great soundtrack, too. And then we have these. Been talking about Full Moon Entertainment, Full Moon Features and all that. Trying to get all the movies that they released in the 90s on VHS that I used to watch all the time. And 2 of these are Trancers 4 and Trancers 5. When it comes to the Trancers series, there's 6 movies. We don't talk about the 6th one in this house because it has nothing to do with the man himself, Tim Thomerson, who plays the main character, Jack Death. The 6th one is one of the worst excuses for something I've ever seen. It's awful. But this was at the tail end of where they were out of ideas of what to do with this character. So the whole idea behind the Trancers films is Jack Death, played by Tim Thomerson, is like a cop in the future who's hunting down this dude who can turn everyday people into these zombie types that he can control, like mindless zombies he can control. And he ends up, because he's being chased, so he's being chased by Jack Death, he ends up finding that he can hide in the past. He finds this technology that lets him move through the consciousness of his ancestors, and he can inhabit one of their bodies in the past. So Jack Death does the same thing. He goes and travels back to the same time period where his prey or his quarry is gone, takes over the body of one of his ancestors, and that's like 1984 LA, and chases him down there, falls in love, ends up staying in the past, and more Trancers situations happen over the course of the movies. He ends up finding out in the third movie where transfers originally came from. So it was the story was kind of over there because like he stopped transfers from the source. Well, they decided that because that was a huge renter, we're going to make some more movies, and they decided to shoot 2 sequels back to back, kind of like The Matrix Reloaded, The Matrix Revolutions. And the thing is, each of these movies is like an hour and 10 minutes, so you basically got a feature-length regular movie, split into 2. So in this one, Jack even goes further back in time to like medieval times to fight a magician who's creating transfer type things in the past. It is beyond stupid. They are really dumb. There's barely a story to last for 2 movies, let alone 1. And the fact that it's split in half just makes it even worse. It is really, really bad and kind of badly made. Even though the guy who directed these, David Nutter, ended up becoming one of the most popular directors for the X-Files, you would not know it by watching these, that he had that in him. So, not a big fan. Next up, we have this big-ass franchise. Currently at 7 movies, and 5 of them are right here, because the other ones, 2 of them I have on 4K. We're talking them Transformers. So, huge Transformers fan from back in the day. Like, when those first hit the scene, the toys first hit the scene, and that cartoon first hit the scene, that was the first time I ever asked my dad if I could have a blank VHS tape so I could start taping the episodes off of the Bozo Show weekday mornings in Chicago. And I begged my parents for those toys because everyone at school was getting into it. I thought they were super cool that you could play with them 2 different ways. They're like robots that you can fight with other robots with, and they turn into cars and you can play it like it is a car. Super freaking cool. So became a huge Transformers fan, saw the animated film back in the day in the theater twice, cried each time when Optimus got killed and all that. So when the announcement that they were finally making a live-action Transformers movie and that Steven Spielberg was producing it and he handpicked Michael Bay to direct it, I was really excited because I thought Michael Bay's, his style would fit this perfectly. I was really excited that Spielberg was behind it because Spielberg, he knows a good story when he reads it. So got a huge group of friends together. It was mostly my D&D group plus some extra people. And we went and saw it opening night. And the opening day kept changing. Like one day it was opening on Friday. And then for some reason it was opening on Thursday. And then for some reason it was opening on Wednesday. And then it opened on a Tuesday. We're like, what? So we ended up going to see it on a Tuesday night. And we walked out of that theater with big-ass smiles on our faces. It was everything we wanted it to be and more. Was there some stupid shit in it? Yeah, a lot of the stuff that has to do with Shia LaBeouf's parents and that dog of theirs. Did not feel it needed to be in that movie. That whole scene with the Autobots trying to hide when Sam's at home and they're hiding around his house and all that. And Optimus is leaning up against the house I hope they don't see me, giant-ass robot right in the backyard. That kind of stuff annoyed the hell out of me. But for the most part, the movie I thought was pretty cool. I love the music by Steve Jablonsky. The special effects by ILM was fantastic. I think they got the personalities of the characters right. I thought I've never really seen Shia LaBeouf in anything before, and I thought he was a perfect leading man for this. I loved his comic timing for things, and a lot of the stuff that came out of his mouth felt really ad-libbed, and I liked it. I really liked Megan Fox in it. I thought they gave her character kind of a really cool arc. The fights are great. The action scenes are great. Everything you wanted to see happen in a live-action Transformers movie happened here. And it even kind of has some after-the-credit type things to set up another movie. Absolutely loved it. I ended up seeing this in the theater, I think, 5 or 6 times. I want to say maybe 5. I could not get enough of it. I thought it was one of the coolest things ever. So when this was first released on home video, it got a DVD release, but the format wars were happening at the time that this came out on home video between Blu-ray and HD DVD. And guess what? It originally came out on HD DVD instead of Blu-ray. So I did have an HD DVD player. I had the one that came with or you could play or use with your Xbox 360. So, of course, I ran out and bought that day one. And I had a Rock Band party once, and while I was waiting for everyone to show up, I was watching the HD DVD version of it, and people were coming in going God damn, this looks fantastic. And I was like, yeah, I know, HD, bro. What the fuck? So naturally, when HD DVD went away, I repurchased this when they got around to releasing it on Blu-ray. It has all the same extras, and actually it's the exact same packaging, except instead of these blue strips on it, it was red on the HD DVD version. That's it. So absolutely, I still I have a soft spot for this movie. I do recognize that it is not great now, but I still get a kick out of it. I think it's a lot of fun. Can't say the same thing for part 2, Revenge of the Fallen. Because I was such a huge fan of that movie, I got IMAX tickets for a midnight showing of this the day that it released, like like Thursday night at midnight, that kind of thing. And I brought a friend with, and I was so into it. You have no idea. Like when Optimus got killed, it was starting to make me feel like I did when I was a kid when I watched the animated movie and Optimus died there. I got choked up. And then when they bring him back and at the end of the movie and he goes after the Fallen, I actually said out loud, "Go fuck him up." I was like into it. Like you have no idea. And the thing was, I remember that when the movie ended, we're waiting for like another post-credit scene kind of thing like they did in the first movie, and there was none. And I said out loud, "That's bullshit." And all the other people that had stayed behind also laughed, and they were like, "Yeah, we know, right?" And I thought they were talking about the fact that there was no after-credit scene. No, they were talking about the movie being bullshit. Because I loved it so much the first time I saw it, I bought a ticket the following day for a noon showing with that exact same friend, and we went and saw it again on the IMAX. And that's when I went, "Oh, I made a mistake." So now that the luster of another Transformers live-action film had gone away, that I had seen it before, I was now not the first time I watched it, I was like just experienced, like just overstimulation. Now I'm actually sitting there watching the movie. I'm like, "Well, that's stupid. Well, that's stupid. That's racist. What is that? What? Devastator had balls? Like, who thought that was funny? I thought it was funny last night, but I'm not finding it funny now. This sucks." I when the space of 12 hours did a complete 180 on this movie. I was like, from what I thought was awesome to this is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen in my life. Because this was made during a writer's strike. So they had half of a script prepared when the strike began, and they basically made it up as they went the rest of the way while the strike was happening because they needed to get this out in the theaters. So that's why it has like this nonsensical offshoot side stories out of nowhere kind of thing going on. That's why the humor goes off the rails, because whatever they thought was funny on set that day, they put in the movie. There's a lot of, like I said, racist shit going on with those twin robots, those twin Autobots. We don't read too good, and shit like that. And it's so dumb. And then even the villain, the Fallen, is just super underdeveloped. Like the Megatron was so built up in the first movie that when he showed up, you're like, yes. Here it's like, hey, there's this Fallen guy that lives on the moon. Okay. Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. And then like Sam dies and goes to Autobot heaven. What? It is so stupid. So not a fan of this one at all, but I bought it because why the hell not? And this is, I think, one of the first Blu-rays that I ever bought that has like an IMAX version of the movie on it. So, the IMAX screen is actually a lot taller than your standard screen. It's almost like a big square. So when it comes to those scenes that were shot with IMAX cameras, you're watching the movie normally in the widescreen. All of a sudden it fills up your entire screen and it goes to the IMAX scenes. And it's the first time I ever saw that happen on a Blu-ray. Now it's pretty commonplace. Which brings us to the third movie, Dark of the Moon, which was mostly shot in Chicago and basically took over the city for an entire summer. I remember before a certain building was built in my neighborhood, I had a clear view of the Sears Tower, or the Willis Tower, if you really want to go there, from my back porch. And I remember one day I came home from work, and I'm walking up my back porch, and I kind of hear what sounded like fireworks in the distance. And I kind of like glance over my shoulder, and I can see the Sears Tower, and I see things buzzing around it. And I took a really good look, and I'm like, are those helicopters? And then just as I recognize them as helicopters, I see all these little dots falling out of the helicopter. I'm like, what the hell is that? And it was the parajumpers from that scene where their helicopter plane thing, I can't remember what they call them, gets destroyed, and a bunch of the soldiers that were inside jump out the back to get away from it. And I'm like, oh, they're filming Transformers. I'm like, oh, that's freaking awesome. I can stand here and watch them film Transformers. This is the shit. Went downtown to shoot some footage of Chicago for this sketch comedy series that I was producing for YouTube. And while we're stuck in traffic, horrible traffic in Chicago, me and my cinematographer look aside, and this car comes racing up beside us, and it's this gigantic black truck. And my cinematographer, Jason, goes, "Oh, look, it's Ironhide." And I went, "What?" And I bent over to look through the windshield because I was kind of being blocked by another car. And I go, "Holy shit, it was Ironhide." It was like the car they were using for the physical Ironhide driving around the block so it can get back to the beginning of the street where they were shooting and shoot whatever scene they were doing again. I'm like, okay, that's awesome. We just saw frickin' Ironhide on the street. Rad. Also, there was an accident that happened with one of the Bumblebee cars. They were shooting a scene with Bumblebee racing down the street that was empty. They had blocked off all of the entrances so no one else could get on the street, but a stupid cop decides that didn't apply to him. So he goes racing through the barricade just as Bumblebee is coming down the street and collides, and both cars got demolished. I don't know if anybody got hurt, but I remember hearing about that. So it basically took over Chicago. You could not go downtown Chicago without running into them shooting something. They had I can't remember what they used to call those things in World War II, those big metal X's that would be on the beaches and stuff that you can kind of hide behind. They had those on the sidewalks and stuff for where they were shooting. It was nuts. So I was like, this movie better be awesome for all the inconveniences that it caused during that summer, because it made traffic getting home or coming into the city impossible. Traffic that would normally take you 15, 20 minutes was now taking you an hour and a half to 2 hours to get through. So I'm like, the movie better pay off. So when it came out, me and my friend Charlie went and saw it day one, and the entire last half of this movie takes place in Chicago, and it is kind of amazing. The movie itself is still pretty shitty. Another one where they kind of just threw a whole bunch of random comedy sketches in here for no reason. Like the thing with Ken Jeong doing a little thing with his neck. He was like, "You messed with the wrong guy." It's like, what the hell does that have to do with anything? Why are there all these nutty people in these movies? These unhinged people. So, but when it comes to Chicago, you get to watch Chicago get demolished in this movie, for a good hour and a half. It is fantastic. And I love the score in this one specifically. I think it's fantastic. So I went and saw this, I want to say 3 times in the theater because I could not get enough of watching Chicago get demolished. It's pretty awesome. The 3D is absolutely fantastic. Some of the best 3D I had ever seen at that point. Which leads us to the next movie, because that one made over $1 billion worldwide. So, of course, they're going to make another one. But Shia LaBeouf felt that 3 of them was enough, and he decided to move on with his career. So Michael Bay had just made this movie Pain and Gain with The Rock and Mark Wahlberg. So he's like, "Hey, Mark Wahlberg, you want to come over and be in the Transformers movie that I'm going to do in a couple months?" It's like, "Yeah, say hi to your mama for me." So they made the 4th one, Age of Extinction, which is also in 3D. I bought the 3D version of it. It has a really rad lenticular cover. And saw this the day after I broke up with my ex, with my buddy Josh that I was doing my Toasty internet show with at the time. We went and saw this and reviewed it on the show. And when it was over, we're both like, well, that was a movie. It has some cool stuff in it. It has some really stupid stuff in it. Michael Bay has a thing for really dumb comedy that has no right being in a movie ever, no matter what kind of movie it is. There's some cool ideas in here, but for the most part, it's just a lot of product placement and pandering to the Chinese audience, because that's where a lot of the third movie's money came from, was China. So, of course, the entire finale of the movie takes place in Hong Kong, and it has a lot of really awkward product placement. Stanley Tucci's character is being chased by Transformers, evil Transformers, across Hong Kong, gets on the roof of a building, an apartment building, and sees a box of, what is it, Milka? Or that yogurt drink that comes in a juice box looking thing that they drink in China. And he has to stop, sit down, pick up a box of this thing, puncture it with the straw, and sip it with the logo in full view. It's a good 45-second product placement thing that they kind of are really drawing attention to itself with. It's really awkward, and they do it a lot, which really bugged the hell out of me. Like I said, there's cool stuff in it. It ends on a cliffhanger. Optimus is like, the hell with this. I got to go and take care of the people that are trying to destroy the Earth. Bye! And he takes off into space, and then the movie ends. So there's some rad stuff in it. Some shitty stuff. For the most part, it's kind of ugh. But nothing could have prepared me for the 5th movie, The Last Night. So I was kind of excited to see how the cliffhanger from the 4th movie was going to get resolved, because they introduced the Quintessons in the fourth movie, and instead of being those robotic multi-head beings from the animated film, they have a different head for a different personality. They introduced them as like these organic beings who seeded planets with transformium to make the robots that they would later come back and try to harvest. So at the end of the fourth movie, Optimus Prime is like, I need to go and look up these quintessons and find out what the hell they thought they were doing, trying to like seed planets with like transformium. Bye. Well, they decided to retcon it, for starters, by instead of it making a race of people, it's one person. It's like one robotic being they call Quintessa, which makes no freaking sense. And she turns Optimus against everybody. She makes him like a bad guy. So now he's got purple eyes because he's half good, half bad. And then they also introduce Arthurian legends in this and set up the fact that Bumblebee has been on Earth for centuries. And that's kind of bullshit because he showed up with the rest of everybody. He showed up, like, I think just before the other Autobots did in the first movie, but they retconned that too. And that's why they made the Bumblebee movie that they did, which I liked. But this one is just beyond stupid. It feels like it was being made up as they shot it. It has no plot. Nothing is going on. Anthony Hopkins should be embarrassed that he is in this movie. I went and saw this opening day in the IMAX in 3D. And while I will say this had some of the best 3D I had ever seen in my life, it is beyond great. Really thought out well. Like it never had one headache, never saw any blur, nothing. It is perfect. It is an embarrassment of a film. It is just a huge ass mess of things happening that make no sense. And I was like embarrassed. I realized I was one of three people in that theater, and I'm like, well, I do not foresee, because the fourth one made over $1 billion too because of all that Hong Kong stuff that they did. Like in China, the movie was a gigantic, massive hit. So when I saw that there were only three people in that screening opening day, I was like, well, this one's going to be the one that kills it. And sure enough, it did. This one underperformed like you would not believe. It is a huge mess. And I will say it does have one of the greatest pieces of music in it ever composed by Steve Jablonsky. And the 3D on this is just as good as it was in the theater. But this movie is a gigantic piece of shit. I did not buy this brand new like I did most of these. I found this at half-price books for $10. And I was like, oh, the 3D version? I'll take that because the 3D is good. The movie ain't. Next up we have... Oh, no, don't go into the light. Come here. We have two films from a franchise I'm kind of on. I just bought these because they were cheap. And that's the Transporter series. We had Transporter 1 and 2, Jason Statham. I'm a huge Jason Statham fan. Me and a couple of my friends go and see pretty much every movie that he ever has made. Although we have been missing out on that. We haven't been keeping up to that promise lately. We missed The Beekeeper, and I'm not sad that we did because I saw it on home video and I hated it. These are, what is it? Corey Yen, who was like a martial arts choreographer in Hong Kong and eventually transitioned into directing. This was like his American movie debut. And Jason Statham's pretty good at doing martial arts, but when it came to acting in this, everything about it sucks because it stars one of the most annoying actresses in the history of film. This actress named Shu Kui, who everything I've ever seen her in is like, her voice and her acting is like nails on a chalkboard to me. Like it makes me cringe. There's that movie Gorgeous that she was in, which I was like, this is like, no. Why did they cast her in this? She is awful. She won the equivalent of like a Hong Kong Oscar for one of the movies that she made, which I saw, and I was like, no, she's terrible. I don't get it. She almost ruins this movie, because when I saw this in the theater, I absolutely hated it. I wanted to leave. But I watched it again when it came out on home video, because the second one was coming out, and I was like, well, if it was that popular, and they're making a sequel, maybe there was something I missed. So I went back and watched it again. I'm like, I don't like her, but the movie it's okay. It's got some fun moments. There's a really weird fight scene in this where Jason Statham covers himself in motor oil during a fight so people can't grab him. So he greases himself up. But yeah, he's like a person you hire who has he's like a professional driver and bodyguard. You hire him when you want something taken someplace securely, or you want somebody, transported securely. He's the guy you hire. He ends up getting personal with this girl that he's asked to transport, who has been kidnapped. And when he realizes she's been kidnapped, he's kind of like, I'm not cool with that, though. So I'm going to help this girl, and it kind of gets him in trouble with the people that hired him. But then we have this off-the-wall sequel, and who's the guy who directed this? Oh, shit, it's too small. It's not Olivier Megaton. I think he did the third one. But it's one of Luc Besson. These are Luc Besson produced and written films. And one of the people that he always has directed a lot of his movies is this guy and Olivier Megaton. I'm not a fan of the third one at all. It's like really, really bad. This one is just as ludicrous an action movie as an action movie can possibly get. It is just beyond off-the-wall action. There's a scene where Jason Statham drives his car like up a building. Sure. There's a woman who is like one of the main villains who is always wearing just lingerie when she's doing fight scenes and shit. And she kind of gets off on being hurt. Sure. It's nuts. But it's fun nuts. Yeah, the girl who likes the lingerie is right here on the cover. It's nuts and it's entertaining. I went and saw it in the theater with my parents because there was nothing else playing that weekend. And I was like, yeah, whatever, let's go. And I was just sitting there going, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen, but I kind of like it. It's a schlocky, turn your brain off action movie. And then we have a movie from Troma, and that is Tromeo and Juliet. It's Troma's version of Romeo and Juliet. And James Gunn, who does all the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, is running DC Films, wrote this. This is like one of his first screenplays. And I think he's in this. Is him or his brother? Yeah, Sean Gunn, the guy who plays Kraglin in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. He's in this also. And it's good. I like it. It's funny. There's a bunch of dick jokes and dick like visual things that they do, which are kind of stupid. And then like the characters are talking in like regular 90s, early 2000s speak. But then every once in a while they just randomly start talking Shakespeare, but they add like curse words into it and stuff like that. It's really kind of silly, but it's actually one of the better made Troma movies. Like it actually feels like they were trying. I think it's because James Gunn's script was actually kind of good. So they're like, well, we got to try to give it justice or do it justice. So it's fun. I think it's one of the better Troma movies they've ever made. It's a lot of fun, but it's also got your typical Troma stuff in it. There's a lot of, nudity and stupid gore and like, jokes that don't really fly and certain lingo being thrown around that's not cool, but it's still fun. I still haven't watched this one, but I bought this when they were having a sale on the Full Moon website, and that is Trophy Heads. I think this was a web series at first. It was like a bunch of episodes that they just put together into one movie when they were completed. And these feature a bunch of scream queens from the 80s and 90s who have all been in a Full Moon movie at some point in time. Like, where do they have the names? I know one of them's Linnea Quigley. One's Denise Duff from the Subspecies movies. One of them's Brink Stevens. I can't remember who the rest are, but there's 6 former scream queens that are being hunted down by this guy who is like in love with them all and wants to cut their heads off and collect them. So I remember Retro Cult Hunt videos saying that it was fun. It's not great, but it's fun. So when this was on sale, I think it was like $10. I decided to pick it up. I still haven't gotten around to watching it yet. This I do highly recommend to anybody, everybody, comedy, horror fan, whatever. And that is Tucker and Dale versus Evil. I saw this in the theater with my ex. It was playing at the Music Box one night, and I was like, we need to go and see this. I've been reading about it all over the place on the web. It sounds awesome. It also has a star from Firefly and Serenity in it. We need to go see it. And she was like, okay. And when it was over, she was like, and I was also saying, that was one of the most clever horror movies I've ever seen in my life. It was super funny. It is hilarious. So basically, these 2 rednecks, played by Tyler Labine and Alan Tudyk, everybody keeps thinking, because it's like the whole appearances are everything. Everyone looks at them and immediately thinks, you're a redneck. So when people start dying in the forest, they immediately think they're redneck killers. A bunch of teenagers, like privileged teenagers from the city, are traveling through the town that these 2 live in. And the thing is, whenever somebody dies, it's like the rich kid's fault that they have died. But there's something that has happened that makes it look like the rednecks are the reason why it's happened. So Alan Tudyk is working in the forest. He's got like this wood chipper behind him, and he gets attacked by a bunch of bees. And this one dude who thinks that these rednecks are killing everybody decides to try to jump at him to attack him just as these bees are attacking Alan Tudyk. So he bends over to go like this just as the guy jumps at him, and he leaps over Alan Tudyk and into the wood chipper. So he sees the guy in the wood chipper, and he tries to help him, so he grabs him by the legs, and he's trying to pull him out of the wood chipper, but the guy's dead. And the rest of the rich kids run over when they hear the screaming happening, and all they see is Alan Tudyk looking like he's trying to shove the guy into the wood chipper, but it's the actual opposite thing happening. It's all about misunderstandings, and it is so funny. Like, they just, and then there's even a joke, like, why do these rich kids keep coming to my land and killing themselves on it? It is super rad. I love it so much. And they're still talking possibly a sequel happening. I hope it happens. Next up, we have the Twilight Zone movie. This is an anthology horror, sci-fi, fantasy thing. So a lot of really good directors involved with this. You have George Miller, first thing that he had ever directed that was not a Mad Max movie. You have George Miller, you have Steven Spielberg, you have Joe Dante. Let me see. And John Landis. Sorry. And there's this wraparound story with Dan Aykroyd and James, what's his name? Not James Woods. Albert Brooks. But you have 4 different stories. You've got one about this bigot who is angry at everybody. His life is going down the shitter, and he blames everybody else for his problems. So he blames, like, well, the Jews are the blame for this, the blacks are the blame for this, and all that. And then he ends up like traveling back in time, and everyone's looking at him like he is one of these people that he hates, and he gets to feel what it's like to be one of those types of people. And it's like a real eye-opening short film. I really like that one. That one is like really effective. There's another one about a kid who has special powers, and he has like basically kept this family hostage with the threats of violence because of his special powers. It's really kind of crazy. There's one about a retirement home, and all these people who are like, getting pretty close to the time where they might possibly pass, decide to play a game of kick the can, and it makes them young again for one night. And it's the Steven Spielberg one. It's the overly sentimental one. And then the last one is a remake of the episode from the original Twilight Zone show that William Shatner was in, where he's a passenger on a plane and keeps on thinking he's seeing a creature on the wing destroying the wing. Except this time it's John Lithgow playing that character, and it's really cool. It's really funny. That's the George Miller one. Absolutely love it. It's a classic. It used to be on cable all the time when I was a kid. Watched it every single time it was on. Absolutely loved it. And the last movie I'm going to talk about tonight is Twins. I have seen this movie more times than I can count. We went and saw it in the theater because my grandma had a gigantic crush on Arnold Schwarzenegger. Every time we would see an Arnold movie, or an Arnold movie would come out, she would end up visiting magically, or we would be visiting her, and she'd be like, "Can we go see that Arnold movie?" God. And I remember every time he would be on screen, especially if she could see like his muscles, I would hear her go, "Oh my." It was the funniest shit ever. So this is the one where, this is like the first big comedy that Arnold did, like big budget comedy with him and Danny DeVito, where they turned out they were like twins separated at birth, but Arnold got all the good traits, and Danny DeVito got all the bad traits. And when they come together, they kind of like work well together. They kind of cancel each other out, I guess you want to say, but it's really funny. I really like this one. I didn't think Arnold would be able to handle comedy, even though he kind of did comedic things in his movies before, but I never saw him actually be in a movie where it was all about the laughs, and it ended up being so good that they ended up making Kindergarten Cop, which I think is even funnier. So had to pick this one up from Scream Factory when it was released. I need to watch it again because there's still talks of them making a third movie with Eddie Murphy being another one of the part of this troupe, and it's going to be called Triplets. So I hope they do that because Eddie Murphy, I think, is back after that new Beverly Hills Cop movie. Well, I don't think the movie was great. It was good. I think that he is back. He is just as funny as he's ever been in that. So I'm hoping. So thank you everybody for coming and hanging out with me tonight. I really appreciate it. Each and every one of you, even if you weren't talking in the chat, I'm glad you were here. I will be back next Thursday for another one of these Film Collection 2024 live streams. I'll be talking about probably the rest of my collection. It's probably going to be like U through Z, because I think I don't think I have enough movies to. I would not be able to split it in half. It'd be like a 20-minute stream, I think, if I did that. So might be the final Blu-ray stream next week. If I decide to split it in half, it'll be 2 more. But then after that, we'll go into the 4K movies that I have, which I think is going to be great because I have a lot of interesting stuff on 4K. And don't forget, also, I'll be releasing the next episode of my Dungeons and Dragons campaign, Tides of Flame, here on my YouTube channel Sunday afternoon, probably around noon. So keep an eye for that if that interests you at all. So going to call it a night here, everybody. Thank you once again. Stay safe out there. I'll talk to you next time. Chris of Midlife Crisis Media, out.